All right, good morning, everyone. Scott, we ready?
Yep.
Very good. Good morning, Leslie.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks so much. And the sound is really good this time. So I apologize for being remote, but I, got some things I got to get done here in town.
So, all right, minutes in our April 18th meeting. Any changes or corrections needed? If not, would someone make a motion to accept? Joe Semyon, is there a second? Dave? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Budget report is attached. Pretty straightforward on the revenue side. Got some investment earnings. And then the second line in yellow is the amount we had to transfer from our reserve fund to pay the bills. On the bill side down below, it's salary and taxes. $800 payment made to Environmental Design Partnership for their continued work on our Trion generator project. We had a $179.40 payment for work on our website and a reimbursement for Dave for his travel expenses going to the IDA seminar that he drove to. And that was it. And 2 pages later is your status on your T-bills and where those currently stand. We'll talk about that a little further later in the agenda. Any questions? Morning, Greg. I make a motion, Jim. Thank you, Mike.
I can second it.
Sue, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Audit committee monthly bank statements. Mike?
I reviewed them yesterday and everything is in order.
Very good, thank you. County reports, Leslie from the CRG. Their report is attached to your agenda, folks.
It is. And I don't know that you need me to run through the whole thing, but maybe I could give you just a couple of highlights.
That'd be fine.
That'd be great. Okay, so I'll take you down to number 3. Well, no, number 2. How could I skip that? The micro enterprise grant initiative is really strong. It's helping a lot of small businesses. It's a pleasure. I serve on that committee as well, and it's a pleasure to be looking at how the businesses are providing the information that they need. That's kind of a pain when you're a small business. You don't have anyone else to do that. And they're stepping up and then in line, and we're distributing that as roundly as we can around all the major county areas. So you can see the numbers. It's pretty amazing that we're looking at 1.75 million, under that program looking for this year. So for round 4. So just to say that's a bright light, and you can go talk to some of those businesses and see how that's helped them. We are funding for 30As moving along on number 3. I did want to spend a minute on the Brownfield Developer Summit. Did anyone here at the table attend that summit? Okay, so what you noticed, I asked for some details from that. I was out of town, so I couldn't go. Last year, as a comparison, we had 103 participants. This year, we had 210 registered and had somewhere north of 25 who walked in. So it's really gaining traction and going well, to the point that at the meeting the day before with the EPA meeting, the regional director made some mention that he wished that our model that we're using here together could go state or nationwide as a template. And even made a comment about us, the CRG people taking it on the road, to which Ron kindly responded, and where is the funding for that? But it's good to know. And we certainly attracted a different level of speaker, to have the Attorney General there was really something. And so we are really standing well, and things are going forward. And the last thing I wanted to say is that we do have this week a developer already interested in coming to see a couple of the properties in Gloversville. So all good news on that. Everything else is pretty much as you read it, but I wanted to give you the inside details on that one. Any other questions on the report?
Yeah, I was just curious about number 3, the large project in Gloversville. Roof for
Yeah, that's the Route 38 project, the one that we're looking for the grant for Stefanik.
Okay.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Leslie. All right, at this time, Mike will give a quick introduction to our guest speaker here today. So Mike, do the honors.
Yes, after last month's discussion about opportunities for housing in the county, I reached out to some of the people within the bank that work closely with some of our developers. They quickly turned me to David Kimmel, who's joined us here today. He represents his family's company 2+4, and the second company is Lakewood Development. So his family has been doing development in upstate New York for decades. And David was nice enough to, when I reached out to him and spoke with him, to come and describe to the board how his company develops affordable housing and what partners they use and how the IDA might be a partner in the development of some of those projects and the roles that IDAs can play to assist their communities in building out needed housing infrastructure. So with that, David, take it away.
Thank you.
And
I just have
give
a
you the floor.
PowerPoint if you have a free USB port, I can just plug into. Yeah, it should. So let me just get this. I don't think your mouse is gonna work. It's gonna be the IGA presentation. Yes.
Right.
I
Yeah.
haven't, no.
Oh, you haven't figured that out.
Yeah, it's the water. And first they try to get this plug and play.
All right, so I will warn everybody that I am pretty verbose, so don't feel bad if you got to get the hook out for me if you want to get on with your meeting.
Is there any way to share that through the Zoom meeting also?
Yeah, I'll try here.
Okay, thanks.
The share screen right to the.
Scott's doing it and
I'm very well versed with Zoom just because I did my
Just saying.
master's at
Thank you.
Syracuse all through Zoom. Which
Oh,
was quite an experience, and this was prior to the pandemic. So it was a little bit of an interesting trial. Here, I can just hit space if that's okay.
You can say next slide if you want.
All right, so I'm David Kimmel. I'm, as I was introduced, I'm representative of, we call them the 2+4 companies, 2+4 management, and 2+4 construction, as well as Lakewood Development 3, which is our development arm. Next slide. So who am I? There's going to be a couple here.
Yeah, you do it.
Oh. Supposed to be, so I'll just riff on that. So basically, who am I? I'm David Kimmel. Basically, I've been doing affordable housing for the last 10 years for my family business, 2+4 companies. We've been in business for over 40 years doing affordable housing across upstate New York. So we started off in the rural markets. So my grandfather back in the 70s, when they kicked off the 515 program, was very prolific within the program, building about 12 properties a year all across New York State. So we've have, properties in the Adirondacks, properties in the North Country, Southern Tier, Western New York, and sometimes we discover properties that apparently my grandfather built back in the 70s that we don't even realize when we go to manage them. So we're very well versed in the USDA RD space. About roughly 2000, when my mom came into the business, they expanded more into the tax credit, low-income housing tax credit space. She really grew the company from there, making us one of the top developers in upstate New York for affordable housing, and as well as getting us into the 4% bond world with some of our larger developments. As when I started, roughly 10 years ago, started off as a construction day laborer, really, we have a culture in our business where if you're going to come into the family business, you really are expected to work every job that's in the company so that you know, kind of what you're asking your staff to do. So I've worked pretty much every position within the company. I have a good sense of, how things are going in the business, how, managing a property is from not just a global level, but also on the site level as well. So the basics of the housing process, when a community wants to attract housing, really the first thing that they got to realize is, developers really go through a couple of basic processes. First is site selection, then financial modeling, and then actually going to get the financing. So really, if you're looking at a market rate developer, they're throwing out market studies every year. They're looking for cheap land, companies to be locating in areas, to really do that kind of housing. And, when you kind of are trying to plan for housing, it's easy to get stuck in that mindset. But there's also a support economy of low wage workers that you also need to house in your communities to help support and attract some of the larger companies to come in and locate. As we all know, housing in New York State just keeps going higher, higher, higher in cost, whether it's through rents, whether it's through housing prices. So there's no starter homes for families anymore. It is definitely becoming, quite the crisis. So how can a community foster that development? Really comes down to identification of sites, zoning, and knowing your market very, very well. Basically, with identifying sites and zoning, instead of relying on a developer to come in and access, sites that we think are nice or easy to build, if we come in and do that, we might get kicked out because we're building somewhere where the density really doesn't make sense. If a community can come up and say, okay, we have this area, everyone agrees high density housing should go there. That kind of removes the NIMBYism because it's not a developer coming in saying, hey, this is what kind of housing we need. It's the community identifying where that housing can be located, as well as, what they're willing to tolerate in a design standard. Because that is one of the major things that are hitting us today, is the fact that the NIMBYism is intense out there. Very, very intense. And it's not exactly coming from a place of knowledge, it's coming from a place of fear. So how can an IDA help with that kind of environment? I was saying earlier to Jim, it's kind of being a quarterback of the process. The IDA has a unique position into really looking at, yes, the industrial or the industry part of the county, but really development in the county as a whole. Because the support of the housing underneath is going to support the industry you're trying to attract into your county. Now, going through the housing strategy guide that was graciously provided to me, it looks like Fulton County is really focused on kind of two areas, the non-Adirondack Park area, as well as areas within the Adirondack Park that really haven't seen much development or growth of housing. And where you guys are trying to push more of that recreation economy. And in order to have a recreation economy take off, you need those low wage workers who are going to be your bussers at restaurants, your bellhops at a hotel or a resort, doing some of those low wage jobs. You need that kind of, I don't want to say low wage housing, but that affordable housing for them to live, to help build up the workforce so that, if I'm going to build a resort, I'm not paying people to drive 40 minutes to come work at my resort. They live in the town, they can walk, they can do a short drive, but as well as free up some of that housing stock that may be dilapidated, maybe chopped up into multiple apartments, as you see in cities like Syracuse a lot, and return them to single family homes and return some of the smaller single-family homes from rentals into a home ownership, and providing those for families who want that home ownership pathway a chance to get it through the old starter home and upgrading to a little bit of a bigger home process. The other way an IDA can really help is identifying those old buildings that were of use that are no longer in use. So old factories, maybe historic properties that have been, fallen on hard times. These can all be identified as places where you can attract a developer to do some of this bedrock affordable housing, and then use that catalyst of development to spur the creation of more housing, retail, as well as industry. So I have a couple of case studies, and of course, these are the ones that pop up probably because I didn't use animations on them. But this is Watkins Glen Middle School. This is a project that we work directly with the Schuyler County IDA with doing this project. So through their organization Scopes, they put out an RFP for the Watkins Glen Middle School. The school was going through a centralization. They had this beautifully built middle school, used to be the high school. It was going to just sit vacant, and it was in a prominent place in their downtown. So they issued an RFP saying, hey, developers come in, propose your best use. And Lakewood Development 2 LLC, which was my mother's development arm, won the RFP. So the project itself, it became a 51 apartment, age restricted housing with 8 project-based Section 8 vouchers for some of the most vulnerable seniors in the area. And when you look at the financing, low-income housing tax credits, housing trust fund, all stuff that HCR provides, historic tax credits, which is major with renovating some of these older historic buildings. And by historic, they really say a building should be, or a style should be about 40 to 50 years old. So buildings in the 60s and the 70s are even coming up as historic, as long as they have those architectural flourishes to them. But the most important part is a $900,000 ESD grant that the IDA helped us get for the performing arts space that was built into the project. And that's where an IDA can come in and help, again, be a quarterback, whether it's directing a developer, hey, there are some ESD funds that you can access that you may not know about. This is the pathway to do it. Or saying, hey, if you do this project a certain way, it can get you these, grants, other funding that's available that developer may not know about. Because most developers, we may know about the HCR programs. You may have some who know and understand the USDA RD, 515 or 538 programs, which are both loan programs for affordable housing. But not a lot of developers, unless they're very large, very sophisticated, know about the Empire State Development grants or that world, especially when it comes to multi-use, retail first floor, apartments second through whatever floor kind of housing. And those ESD grants are huge when it comes to really renovating a property back to its full use, especially when it's affordable housing, as HCR does not have programs to support commercial use other than a $2 million per project CIF program, of which you must have a 1/3 match. So it's not a very easy program to use. So as you can see, it was awarded in 2014, completed in 2015. It was about a $15 million cost. So here are some pictures. You can see, since we use historic tax credits, a lot of the historic parts of the building have been preserved. If you were to drive by, you probably wouldn't know it's affordable housing unless you saw the sign. And one of the great things that the county actually leased back the performing arts space to use as an event center. So they do their local film festival there. If there's people coming in with the races, they may put on concerts or programs there. but it really has become a good centerpiece to the village and has preserved, quite a large building from becoming a large eyesore.
When you say affordable housing, is it income based and they have to qualify?
Yeah, so there is that misconception, I guess is the best way to use a word, that when you do affordable housing, it's all subsidized housing, and that's not 100% true. You will see a lot more subsidized housing in this world because, again, with the interest rates as they are with the bank and with the Fed being very unpredictable with their rates, it affects the lending rates. So it affects the construction lending on a lot of these projects to where you need some of those lower incomes to do a project. But again, that's where an IDA can come in and say, hey, we want these parameters for this building, and we are going to try to get funding to help make sure that you can meet those parameters instead of going for what is the funding that's going to make a project work. A lot of developers, when they are, at least when I look at projects, I try to make a project work, especially if it's a community that has come to me for housing, and try to find a way so that you can move forward. And sometimes using those Section 8 units is a way forward. But typically affordable housing, if you don't have the subsidies attached, you have to fall under an income guideline, but you also have to be able to afford the rent. So there's a minimum and a maximum, we call them income band, that you fall within. And that's why it's a great option for those hard to develop properties like collapsed buildings. Brownfields is another place where, market rate developer isn't going to come put, $2,000 rent units in an old abandoned factory if it's collapsed, got environmental issues. Whereas if someone's using state money, you can kind of absorb some of those costs with the lower cost state money and leave the more prime land for market rate developers or for those who are in the more moderate to, middle income brackets. These days, HCR does allow you to go up to and above 80%, depending on your local rental conditions. So if your rents are high enough to support those higher incomes, they allow you to go to those. So we've seen anywhere, I have ones that we've done up to 80% AMI. That's, for Syracuse, I know that's roughly 45 to 50,000 for a two-person household. So they do allow you to go to those higher incomes. What caps you is on the backside is the state says, well, you can't pay more than 30% of your rent towards income. So it kind of handicaps with who you can rent to. But it does allow you to do some of these transformations with buildings that seem like you can't really do without some of that government low-cost funding.
David, on that project too, did the IDA assist you with any other incentives, pilots?
The IDA did a pilot with us for the, I think 25-year pilot, which again, when we work with IDAs with pilots, and not every developer is like this, a good way to do a pilot that's palatable to a populace is when you submit an affordable housing project like this one, because it's affordable housing, you have to use the 581A valuation to do the valuation for the property taxes. So if you follow real property law 581A, they take your income, they take out all of your required deposits because you're a governmental regulated entity, and they spit out adjusted value based on your income. What we say is, okay, that's year one. We're gonna have to pay that whether you give us a pilot or not, and then work in 5-year escalators off of that. So that's what we did with the Watkins Glen with the Schuyler County IDA. They did give us incentives in sales tax as well as mortgage recording tax. So they did do away with those for us to help kind of get this project going. And again, that's where, as an IDA, you don't have to do this for everybody and for every parcel of land. But if you have a couple of buildings or a couple of eyesores you can target those, kind of do these common sense incentives to get someone to come in and to do that type of housing. And that can work even with, market rate housing. It doesn't have to be affordable housing. But that's a way to attract a developer to say, hey, I know this is going to be a huge risk for me going into this building, doing this work. I can come across asbestos, I can come across contamination, but I'm getting these incentives. It makes it more, less risky for me to do this. Where pilots kind of get a bad rap is when you look in places, us in Syracuse, we're kind of have a little bit of PTSD from the Conjal era with Destiny and with a lot of the market rate apartment complexes getting large pilots. But if you do it in a fair kind of common sense way, that's a good way for the IDA to participate without the public blowback.
David,
That
could
is-
you do me a favor and catch the slides up, because I'm still on the first slide.
Oh,
I didn't want to interrupt you.
that's okay. Because on here it's showing that we're,
Yeah, it says we're sharing.
Says we're sharing.
Huh.
Well, I do have the first slide.
well, and I was gonna leave the flash drive here anyway, so that you guys have a copy, and I have paper copies of the slideshow as well. So if,
Sharing the wrong screen. You shared the PowerPoint before you went to full screen. When you go to full screen, that's actually a different screen. So hit stop, share. Do you share or share your screen again? And now go see how it's two, you want the one on the far left, that one. Oh, I got it.
Yay.
do you see it now?
I got it. Thank you.
So Leslie, I'll back it up, or
No, you don't have to. That's okay.
Okay.
I've been listening.
Out of that chair, let Greg sit over there.
That's how Zoom is, and just wanted to.
Gladly. FMCC 1, Syracuse nothing.
So this is the next case study. This one I think is really remarkable case study. It was in the city of Wellsville, New York, which is down PA border, Western New York. It was in an old building called the Burris Building, which was a furniture store back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. The village actually purchased the building because the building was dilapidated. The furniture store closed, the owner kind of abandoned the property, and the back wall collapsed, completely collapsed on the building. So they got ESD grants to initially just stabilize the building so that the facade didn't collapse and damage the two adjoining businesses that were on either side of it. What we ended up doing is we took the 2 million in money that the village had gotten, layered just a little bit of the financing from HCR, and was able to completely transform the building, basically rebuild everything except for the front facade from scratch to a beautiful senior housing project in the middle of their downtown, as well as providing the village new office spaces. Because that is the other kind of intriguing aspect that you can do with affordable housing, is you actually can get some incentives where you can offer a local municipality close to $0 rents. I think the village of Wellsville, for that building, they paid $1 a square foot, if not less, annually for rent. So it's, way under what they would get, either in maintaining. They get full we maintain the building for them. They have our maintenance guy that helps do their maintenance and everything. And it's a low cost for them where they can save money. And I believe there's some programs within the Red Sea that where they can, if they save money, they can get some funding to do projects to save, on their overhead. And that's one way that smaller villages, especially when you're in developmentally constrained areas where you can't expand a village outward as easily, to be able to say, okay, we want a little bit of density, not too much density. Why don't we combine it with the village, with the village town hall, Now the village town hall is, fully handicap accessible to today's ADA standards. You can preserve the building, sell the old building, do whatever, and you're building that density within the community. And a lot of times, you can just do it with seniors. Seniors are one of the most first displaced people out of communities just because A, they can't afford to live there, and B, they can't get services easily there. So hopefully, now I can't get to the next slide. I'm gonna
You should be able to.
stop. See if. Okay, and then I'll re-share my screen. And I also did bring another PowerPoint just to leave you guys with that has more pictures of this development. So basically, what you're looking at right now is what the project looked like as we started working on it, as well as before we did any major work. So as you can see, the bottom left is a drone picture that we had taken. And where you see that exterior wall that's kind of sloped like this, that was the back of the building. So at that point, all that was holding up the roof of the building were stacked 2-bys and kind of a square log house kind of pattern holding up the roof. So as you can see, there were 2 businesses as you're looking at the front to the left and one to the right of the property that would be affected majorly if this building came down. And as you can see from some of the pictures, top left, a little shout out to Jen Teleski right there. Basically all that was left was the front facade once we started stripping everything away. And so really ugly, we had a major windstorm where the front facade was moving back and forth. We almost thought we were going to lose it.
You click on the mouse pad on this, underneath. Yep, there you go.
Okay, so now this is the after. So completely rebuilt back, side of the building. That's now the front entrance to the housing. So the seniors actually are living on the upper 2 floors. They have beautiful views of the village. Our nonprofit partner, Alfred Housing, have got brand new, fully ADA compatible offices on the 1st floor. And on the front side there, where you see some of the storefronts, that's actually now the village offices for the village of Wellsville. So it's provided those 2 organizations with low cost rent and a brand new place that they didn't have to pay a dime for, unless you count, the grants that they contributed. And, on top of that, you get a building that's now fully renovated, beautiful looking senior apartments with vinyl, luxury vinyl plank flooring, as well as, on the back side of the building, instead of a ugly dilapidated back alley, an actual parking space and attractive area. So these are ways that, even if a building looks beyond saving, and this was done without historic tax credits, you can do things and work with developers and work with getting that money to really pull off just transformational, projects like this that can really help, a downtown thrive.
With the first project, you said the IDA issued an RFP, you responded to that. How did you get involved with this project?
So the village of Wellsville, actually, because we've done about 4 or 5 projects in the village of Wellsville. They reached out through Alfred Housing, our nonprofit partner, who chose us to be their co-developer. So in that, it's a little bit more because the Alfred Housing is the local RPC, or rural preservation company for the area. So the village always goes to their local RPC, and then they usually come with us because, again, we've worked with them to get these types of financing. They actually provide the on-site management, and we do the oversight of the regulatory, the financials, and that sort of thing. And that's more because they're an older nonprofit. The village of Wellsville is contracting right now. a lot of their manufacturing is actively pulling out. So this nonprofit is it's a 1-person show right now, and it used to be a 5-person show when my grandfather was doing the initial work with them. But again, these are ways that you can help stabilize your areas and help your local nonprofits, your local municipalities gain updated facilities while also creating density in some of these areas in an attractive way, not in a, here's a ugly box. There's the, those are the poor people apartments, or those are those, small, ugly apartments, not the single family homes we love. You can make it attractive and match what the local area feel is so that it blends in while still giving that density to the community. And then I wanted to include this one because this is where if you don't get all your ducks in a row, an issue can happen. So this was the Roosterfish Brewery redevelopment. So in same village, Watkins Glen, when you first come in, it was one of the first brick buildings as you come into the village. The owner was looking to relocate, and the history of the building was it was an old auto shop and an old gas station, and back in the 40s it was a actual car dealership. So it had buried tanks throughout the property, buried oil tanks. One of them was partially underneath the now road, as well as a support column. Asbestos throughout the building. The building had a fire. So a lot of these, issues with the building that can stop it from going forward. We had negotiated $780,000 as an acquisition price. It's what he initially wanted 1.3 million. We got him to come down to 780,000, but we had $800,000 in remediation. So over that, we got denied funding from HCR because they do an adjusted value for when you purchase property. So if you have, let's say, a private landowner that has a dilapidated building that you want him to fix, and you're just encouraging him to sell the building, they may have in their mind that the building's worth more than it actually is when you take into, rehabilitation costs. So that's asbestos mitigation, removing the oil tanks, basically everything to return it to as close of a greenfield building environment. They will subtract that from the purchase price. So, or from the appraised value of the building. So in this case, we ended up with a negative $20,000 value to the building. So they denied it, saying that we're overpaying or we cannot use their funds to pay for the building because they won't recognize that sale price. So, and it stopped a $13 million project from going forward just off of that small technicality. So, it's not as easy as just, hey, let's get all these crappy building owners together and get them to sell their buildings and we'll do all this work. There has to be some legwork to it to identify maybe some of the issues with these buildings so that when a developer is coming in or a price gets negotiated, you're not at the final hour where you spent, typically for submitting to HCR, you spend upwards of $90,000. And, we spent that $90,000 and we got nothing.
Wow.
And a developer will only do that so many times before they move on to the next project. So
Just out of curiosity, could you have gone to the owner and says, numbers don't work, we'll give you 300,000 for your building?
that's what I tried, and he held fast at 780,000. He didn't want any less. So, because his theory was, well, I'm already running out of here. I don't need to sell. I just, he was receiving pressure from the IDA to sell because the property next to him was renovating, and while he had a decent operation going, it was a little bit of the eyesore of the block. So, he ended up moving after the project failed anyway, and the building now sits vacant. So that's kind of, that's where going back to the IDA being a quarterback where they can, help. And I'm not saying, beat down landowners so they don't get what value they have in their property, because, you want it to be fair. a good deal is a deal where everyone walks away feeling, happy. So you want to make sure that at least, going in, that it's education. It's, hey, I understand you need this much money, but we did this preliminary, asbestos survey, and hey, you got a problem on your hands. Because sometimes there's creative ways to deal with those kinds of issues without beating up a landowner or really, fostering that kind of negative confrontational environment. So that was it. So thank you for you guys' time. I hope I was informative. I'm sorry that the animations in the beginning didn't work, but again, I'm leaving my the flash drive here with the PowerPoints, as well as the Burris Building PowerPoint that has more in-depth details of before and after pictures of the full renovation. And I did print off 10 copies because, as a Boy Scout, I like to be always prepared, and with paper copies of the slideshow as well. I'll also leave with some of my business cards.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
And is there any questions you guys have on top of that, or?
Sue and I were at the Brownfield Development Summit, and there was a lot of discussion there about financing stack. So maybe just briefly, if you could just kind of talk through how the financing structure would look for one of these projects.
So typically, when we're building these for the state has its own, budgeting spreadsheet that, you guys can freely download. It's just on hcr.ny.gov under their development resources for multifamily. And basically, the way we do it now, all different developers can do it all different ways. Nonprofits do it a different way because they have access to certain finances that they can use for construction that we don't. But typically for a for-profit developer, on the construction side, you have mainly a construction loan. You have 30% of that LIHTC equity that your syndicator, your investment banker agreed to provide to the project for the sale of the tax credits. So that construction loan, 30% of that, you defer the full developer fee. So obviously you're not going to get paid until the project's done and built and running. So you defer the full cost of the developer fee, and you defer in that construction cost any required reserve deposits, operating reserves, any startup money, because typically you will go for that in your permanent financing. You don't need that for construction. So that all of that helps minimize your construction loan that you take out. And that really is your big cost driver when it comes to interest rates and everything. Between last year, if we were talking, I would have told you, right now we're at 4.25%. Now, when you go to a lot of banks, it's 7.8%, 8%, 9%. And that's in a jump of just a year. So a lot of that uncertainty can drive up the cost of a project. Now, on the flip side, on the what we call the perm side, or the permanent conversion side, that's where you see the full stack. So usually you'll see tax credits maxed out, your full tax credit, ask the full amount of the equity after the syndicator sells it. Typically you have another component. If it's a market rate, you'll have just a traditional mortgage. With affordable housing, you have one of their other mortgages, housing trust fund, the home dollars program through the feds. If you're doing work with USDA, it may be a 515 mortgage or a 538 guaranteed mortgage. Both are just programs, same kind of like housing trust fund, just a program that the federal government gives you, low cost financing. So typically those, housing trust fund is at 0.5% interest only for 40 to 50 years. USDA is a 1% mortgage for 30 years. So that's where you get kind of that savings, that subsidy comes in the lower interest rates on the permanent conversion side. In addition, a lot of times you'll see, if it's a historic building, typically you'll go for historic tax credits unless, with the Burris building, the National Park Service ruled that because really only the front facade was left from the original building, that it would not qualify for the historic tax credits. But basically, if it can go on the National Register, of historic places, it can qualify for historic tax credits. Because that step is the first step to doing that. So other than that, that's when you start layering, those gap financing, whether it be a deferred developer fee over 15 years to be repaid, whether it's grant money, from ESD or from another source. Sometimes you have an owner who may put in their own equity into a project to help cover a gap to make the project work. So the gap financing part can be kind of, a little bit of everything, but typically you have tax credits that is your equity that, a market rate project would have investors. And some sort of mortgage, whether it's housing trust fund, USDA, whatever. And that's typically the stack that people are looking at. The reason why, and especially in places, like Fulton County, why a lot of market rate developers don't come in is because the market rents are low a lot of times. They don't support the higher interest rates. You end up with these either really, really small projects that just don't, when you take in the cost of the lawyer closing the deal on top of everything else doesn't make sense. Or you have to do like a 300, unit project that's way too big for a community just to get the, economies of scale.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
Your first Watkins Glen project, did your pilot go through the IDA or did you just take the pilot through the municipality?
No, it went through the IDA.
Okay.
The reason why we like to go, we could go directly to a municipality and form a redevelopment company and stuff. What I like going through an IDA is you don't get into that battle of who gets what percentage of that pilot. I don't want to be the one dictating that to people. And if it was Constantia, New York, where I'm from, I can say, okay, I know what, who needs what percentage. But in a community where I don't live, I can't tell them what percentage is. So typically the IDAs we found can, referee that a little bit better so that everyone walks away happy and not feeling like, oh man, the village screwed the school district, the school district really messed things up for the town and all that kind of intergovernmental fighting.
David, thank you.
No
Appreciate
problem.
your time. I'll take those paper copies.
Yep, and I'll leave some business cards too, just in case. I've always learned to be prepared for when things don't exactly work like that. So here. These are the copies of the.
Thank you.
And then here are my stack of business cards.
Right.
And then if you guys think of any questions, if you wanted to shoot me an email, I'll get right back to you guys.
Can do that.
Have you done anything here in Fulton County?
Not in Fulton County, we haven't built anything. We actually managed, and I hate to make the association, but Donna Barnfardisi built a project in Gloversville, Overlook Ridge, and we managed that for a little bit before she removed us as a management company. So, but we haven't done any building here. We do have projects, in the Lowville area, Philadelphia, New York, more of the North Country part of, the Adirondack region. But that's not to say, I'm a little bit familiar with this place because as I was saying before the meeting started, part of my undergrad was spent in Burlington, Vermont. So I drove through here all the time. I love the Adirondacks, and I used to say Vermont was only pretty because you get to see the Adirondacks from it. But and living in a really rural area that is impoverished, I do understand, some of the issues that a lot of these rural communities go through. And I kind of have a special place in my heart for them because, manufacturing was huge. And a lot of these communities like Amsterdam, when your manufacturing leaves, you're left with these husks, essentially. I mean, look at the beech nut factory. It got torn down, and it's just a concrete pad there. And I mean that if you take away even just the job loss aspect of it, but just the mental part of it for a resident who sees things leaving their town that they love so much, kind of desiccating on the vine, you know, it's depressing.
Yeah.
But that's sometimes where, you know, a project like that, like the Wellsville project, you know, is it another factory? No, but at least it gives some hope that things can get better.
Thank you.
Yes, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's jump into our balance of our agenda here under old business from page 3. Nexus Renewables, last month we approved or authorized extending the option term to the end of this year. That amendment has been fully executed. So that's done. With Winstanley, looking at options for upgrading electric out there. A meeting has been set for later this month, or a Microsoft Teams meeting will be held later this month. So that's moving along. The backup generator was delivered out at Tryon and connected on Thursday last week, and they're hopefully going to be back this week to do training and formal startup. So.
And the new one, sparkly.
Yes, it is rusted. With our burial health project, we have a request to act on here today with respect to the deadline for which they can take sales tax exemptions on their project. At present, the deadline is the end of this month, but the project isn't completed. They're still working on it and are now scheduled for completion sometime, hopefully at the end of October. So we've received a request from Vireo to extend the deadline for them taking the sales tax exemptions through October 31 of this year. And again, the reasons for doing so are just the delays that occurred with that proposed acquisition from Verano. But the big issue is just the lead time in acquiring certain equipment, particularly electrical equipment. And Sue can verify that with some other customers that she's working with. They're still waiting for electric panels out of Vireo that were ordered over a year ago, and they still haven't been delivered. So, so the request is to extend the deadline for when they can use sales tax exemptions through October 31 of this year. Now, part and parcel to this request is the action that you took last year, which was to also increase the total amount of sales tax exemptions that Vireo could take. And you approved that increase contingent upon them signing the agent and equipment lease that is central to us granting them those exemptions and to make the balance of the administrative fee that is owed to us and make that payment. Well, neither of those have been completed. Kara had a conversation with council last Thursday after 3 days of asking if the meeting was. Sorry, I couldn't resist. And
We did speak.
and so apparently that's moving forward now.
Yes,
Based on-
I talked to Andy. He indicated that there's some of the issues that he's been tied up with have now seemed to have either been put to the side or resolved to the extent that he can now focus on this. So he has indicated to me that he will be, the process that I told him is that after today's meeting, I'll follow up with him, let him know the decision that the board made at today's meeting, and then we would wrap this up. I sat him the documents again for his final review. He said he did not believe he was going to have any issue with signing the agent equipment lease. He did thank the board for your continued patience with them as they move forward with this process. There still is an open-ended question as to whether or not they will be able to execute the pilot agreement because they have their financing arm, IIP, has some concerns about the structure. I think it's twofold. I think they really don't have a good understanding of how an IDA works. And second, I think they've had some other issues with tenants in the past, not Vireo, and that's made them a little bit hesitant to get involved in something. But despite the changes that you approved, but they're reviewing those again. So.
So the likelihood is that we're not gonna have a pilot with them. It's just gonna be the sales tax exemptions. Okay, but they still need to get us that agent and equipment lease
Right.
and the balance of the fee that's due. So,
Do we know what the amount is of the balance?
we have the
The fee?
number someplace, yes.
Yeah, it's like, it was
Couple
like,
hundred,
yeah, a couple hundred.
Oh.
thousand.
A couple hundred
yeah,
thousand
yeah,
to us.
to us, yeah.
Oh, so it is significant.
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, I don't understand why they wouldn't, I mean, if they're gonna save money, why wouldn't they?
Immediately sign it.
Yeah,
We're gonna save $800,000 in sales tax.
There's, yes, the sales tax benefits they're getting.
Yeah.
The pilot ones, Joe, it's just an issue with IIP, the financer and the owner of the facility. Not either being comfortable with.
Saving money.
they're have you applications to the recapture, because they're concerned that if Vireo leaves, they have a misunderstanding that we have the ability to take over the facility. We wouldn't be doing that. We would just terminate Vireo from the program, from the IDA and say, you're back in the tax rolls.
Yep,
We
100%.
don't want to take over the facility. So that would be what we would do. The recourse of the recapture was a concern of them because they were concerned that if they defaulted, if you remember, if they defaulted, say in year 5, we have the right to go back and recapture those benefits that they received in years 1, 2, 3. And so they asked that we only agree to recapture for that year that they defaulted, which we agreed to. I modified the language in the documents. I recirculated those documents. And I don't know, I have not heard feedback from IIP's attorney on those, but Andy, the attorney for Vireo, was going to go back and he said it's not over yet, but he was going to go back and try to talk to them one more time and see.
Vireo wants the pilot,
Mhm.
okay, because they understand the savings it would provide to them. But since IIP is involved and financing this project, they have to sign off on it,
Mhm.
and they're the ones raising the concerns.
So
Okay,
they're trapped.
all right.
Okay.
So
Yes, I'll make a motion.
I suggest making the motion to approve extending the deadline contingent upon the signing of the receipt of an executed agent and equipment agreement and the balance of the
And the payment.
administrative fee due. Okay,
Absolutely.
which would require that to be done by the end of this month.
Yes,
Is that fair? Is that okay for that?
That's fine.
yes.
Absolutely. I
Todd's making that
didn't
motion.
realize it
I'll
was
second it.
that
Sue,
kind of money.
everyone understand the motion on the table? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good. Moving on to new business, request again this year from R&R Farms to lease some of the lands at Tryon for them to grow some corn. They've done so in the past number of years. It's been a great relationship. We're helping them. They're providing us with a little income for us. So
Would they like any more acreage, just out of curiosity?
this is about everything that's tillable out there.
Tillable.
Yep. So it was originally about half of this, and then it's grown to this is about all of the area that we can.
I was just thinking about mowing. We don't have to mow if they
Right?
wanna take over everything.
True, but some of the other areas, according to them, that could be done, it's just cost prohibitive for them. It's just too difficult to convert it into tillable soils and usable land. So this is what they've asked for, asking for a motion to authorize the chairman.
I'll make a motion.
Sue and Dave. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? What's that one there? Yeah. Sale of lands to DJF Motorsports. We own a 1/4 acre tiny little parcel on the east side of 30A. DJF Motorsports has offered to purchase this parcel, which we talked about at our last meeting. As Kara advised, in order for us to sell this parcel per ABO requirements, we have to have an appraisal done. I contacted Whitaker Appraisal Group, who's done these before for us, and give us a quote of $400 to repair an appraisal. I'm recommending that we authorize Woodford to prepare this appraisal at a fee of $400 so we can get this thing done and the property sold.
Is the motorsports going to play the lawyer's fees?
Yes, he is.
All right,
Yep,
so,
you'll pay the legal fees of Karis, and we pay for the appraisal.
so we're just gonna net $100, but
That's
at
it.
least it's. All
Yep.
right,
All right.
that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
I like the other deal better.
Well, you make it more than, there's
saying.
5 times as much. I.
I'll make a motion.
Dave, is there a second to that motion?
Second,
Joe? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried.
We'll be on the tax rolls.
Correct. And we have to pay a fire tax every year on that. Treasury bills, our third bill, the 9-month one is coming due next week. Listed here, if you see when we first purchased this T-bill, we received a 2.91% interest rate. Now, as of last week, in the 12-month bill that we would look to reinvest this into is going to be 4.59%. Now, one thing we checked was what's our current money market account making, and right now it's at 4.25%. So, putting it into a 12-month money market, we get 4.59%, but that money is going to be locked in for a year. Or we could put it back into our money market account, which is getting slightly less, 4.25%, but that money would be readily available to us. The other issue is with the T-bill, that rate is locked in for the year. We go into the money market, that rate we just don't know where it's going to go.
Do we need ready access to that much cash?
No, just bringing that to, well, depending upon what we, may be doing, I guess the answer that it could be, but I don't think for that amount, it's going to be an issue. Okay. Again, I just wanted to bring that option to the table in case you had an interest in it. I think right now, we're okay with still having enough in reserve to do the things we want to do. And, 4.59 is a nice rate.
why would we just put it in the higher rate of
Every month.
4.72?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's more paper being switching these things, but our goal is to maximize interest.
We can do
So
that.
I would myself make a motion to put it in the 3-month, if they're paying 4.72,
I would second that.
and then look at that. And the 3 months come up.
Okay. I got a motion and a second.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Also, if you ever need to get at that cash from bank for lending you money, you can, obviously that would, you pay an interest rate that would cut into your yield. But if you need to get to cash, you can find somebody that's collateral and get cash.
I'm gonna talk to Joe, and Joe will give you a good deal.
18% never hurt anybody.
9, we can look at that.
Several invoices from Kara's firm for work the firm performed on the Benjamin Moore expansion project
There we
and the Hoffman's Car Wash project, asking for authorization to make those payments for those 3 invoices.
But you charge those against the company, right? Those should be paid by the company.
But we have to pay them first. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. Paid bills.
Second.
Oh, you wanted to sweat it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I settled that anyways.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Very good. Our mission statement, talked about this at our last meeting, in response to the attendance at our, the IDA seminar. And because you guys had heard that, mission statement should be short, in some instances, 6 words, okay?
You got a paragraph.
Ours slightly exceeds the 6 words, but recognize that when this was adopted back in 2012, we had a smaller version we sent it to the ABO like we're supposed to when got it approved, and they rejected it. Remember that?
Mhm.
And they said it's not clear enough. And so what you ended up coming up with here was a little longer than what the original one was. And so for that as background, is there any change would you like to make?
I thought of one.
Yep.
Offering incentives to Fulton County businesses. Or you could put offering incentives to the Fulton County community. Because I mean, I was looking at the one about Pepsi, it says we make soda. So that's what.
We make yogurt. We make soda.
Whatever, yeah. So something as simple as that. You want to do it as short and sweet as that. We're here to offer incentives.
Well, you might broaden that a little bit to opportunity.
Offer incentives and opportunities
Well,
or opportunities.
we provide opportunities for economic development.
Either way, I think incentives is a stronger word. That's what IDA usually does.
Would you be willing to add sites to that?
Well,
Sites and incentives? Or is that, when you say incentives, that's all inclusive?
yeah, it could be tax credits or
The
sites
are tax exemptions and sites? Okay.
I mean, you're saying, trying to scale it down to 6 words, you can't. I mean, if that's what our chore was, then that's.
I don't think that's
Mhm.
etched in stone to be 6 words.
Mhm.
Okay, it's just, do you want to make it shorter and simpler?
Mhm.
Okay, and either of those, we provide opportunities for economic development. We provide opportunities for businesses. We offer incentives to Fulton County businesses. Those, I think, are all, both of those are good, are options.
Are other IDAs doing the same thing at this point? Or are we just gonna be?
I think all IDAs are encouraged to annually think about your mission statement and, is there a desire to want to make a change?
It's awful wordy.
So remember what the original offering opportunities to the Fulton County community, I mean, that's fine with me. I mean,
For context,
Hmm.
the point of the exercise is to get us to focus on what we're doing with the decisions that we're making. For 3 or 4 sentence, 6-line paragraph isn't something that's going to sit in the forefront of your mind when you're talking about the various opportunities we're trying to support. The recommendation was to get it down to 6 words, to really boil it down to the absolute essence of what it is the IDA is really in the business of doing.
Mhm.
Part of, I think, a recognition that the IDA, Industrial Development Agency, is a bit of a anachronistic reference to a bygone era of industrial only development.
Mhm.
We are, I think, we as an IDA, I'm reading the tea leaves based on what was presented, and you guys feel free to back me up on this because you were both there. I think other IDAs are looking at these strategies as a way of rebranding themselves, trying to stay within their mission, however they're characterizing that, so that they can deliver a message to people who might need the use of IDA benefits in a way that's maybe a little bit more approachable. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. I mean, just to echo what you said, I mean, the concept isn't just the traditional toolbox anymore. It is recognizing the importance of efforts like bringing in the low-cost housing, affordable housing. If you really are interested in supporting industry, it's not just about tax credits for businesses. It's about creating the infrastructure for the community to attract those businesses. And that includes expanding, the historic mission of the IDA to do these additional types of projects.
So that's why my thinking is about we create opportunities for growth. And I think that's intentional to be as widen that as we could possibly cast without being absolutely specific about exactly what incentives we provide. So that maybe it incentivizes people to come and talk to us. Ooh, opportunities for growth. Wow, okay. That, I don't know, maybe our friends at the CRG might object to that because they've got growth in their name. I don't know. Leslie, you can weigh in on that if you like, but
Okay, here, you're on mute.
Leslie, you're on mute. Okay.
No wonder nobody's listening to you. Okay. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna weigh in right now because I want to tell you, this is exactly the conversation that went around CRG, at the time we had to come up with these things, and we've done renewal too. And I just want to commend you. You are right on with, it's got to be about not just now, what's in the future, what's in the past. It does not need to be as a parent because you have that institutional memory, and you've already said that. But you need to be thinking about, and you've said some exciting words, opportunities, growth, and what are you looking for? And that's what you just brought up. What is it you're going towards? So that's all I'll say, but I want to commend you.
Okay,
So how about offering opportunities for growth to the Fulton County community? It doesn't specify businesses, it doesn't specify a certain old school way of doing things.
Why don't you just add an opportunity in the very first sentence and that's it?
What's
The
that?
IDA's mission is to create opportunity through promoting economic growth and prosperity. Drop the rest of it.
yeah, 'cause
It could just be the first sentence.
That's what I mean. So
Yeah.
I think that they had an opportunity somewhere where it makes us.
So you put is to create and promote economic growth and opportunities.
Wordsmith somehow. But
Yeah, don't put prosperity in there.
You can replace prosperity with opportunities.
wait, can I offer this?
Yeah.
Table it for now.
No.
Oh.
Yeah, let me play with some,
Yeah.
Yes.
I got an idea,
Mhm.
of what you're looking, I like the words opportunity, growth. Let me come back with a series of 2 or 3 options.
Mhm.
I'll send it or email it around to everybody,
I
and
actually like the last sentence. I'd like to play with that a little too.
Will it make it Fulton County a desirable place to live and do business?
Yeah.
It's just making it too worried though.
So I'll chime in one more time. What we did to keep things really succinct was we had some bullet points underneath that flesh it out. So you can move those things also off the initial statement, but then have some descriptors.
So, to Leslie's point, I think part of what you're talking about is wanting to be able to communicate a bit of the strategy behind the mission to achieve the mission.
Mhm.
So that's what the bulk of this text really reads to me as, this is how we're going to go about doing the first sentence. The sentence on the start is the mission.
Yeah.
Then the rest is, this is what we're going to do to achieve that mission.
Mhm.
So I think bullet points, or maybe recharacterizing that as a strategy statement, might allow us to still kind of thread that needle between, some of the guidance we're getting from EDC on how IDAs can participate in broader economic development activities without running afoul of ABO that might want to see a little bit more language in there for how we're going to achieve this mission.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about
Nice
the
statement.
housing piece that we're following around with here. If we say provide opportunities for Fulton County businesses. Well, housing may not an involvement in housing may not be to help a business.
Well, right, but you can refer to that sort of thing as development.
Right, that's why I'm saying, if we're saying we provide opportunities for, Joe was saying for local businesses. Versus we provide opportunities for economic growth or economic development, just leave it more generic.
Mhm. And then within that, we can provide a strategy statement that talks about maybe segments, sectors that we're looking to focus on. And the types of incentives we're looking to provide.
Okay.
Would that be approachable for everybody?
Yeah. And I think housing, I mean, David touched on it in his presentation. If you don't have the population here, business may not locate here because I don't have enough employees.
Right.
If I can.
So it is the foundation for,
Yeah.
yeah, industrial development,
Because
whatever.
I've heard over the years that there are businesses that have located here that are having to bus people in from Utica to work in the factory floor. That to me is, you know, they made the decision because they found a solution, but I don't see that as a long-term solution.
And the piggy-
does that.
Maybe that's the business I'm thinking of, yeah.
But to piggyback on that, I have a lot of friends that are in like the restaurant businesses and stuff, and they can't find the lower wage employees, the busboys, the servers and whatnot. They're just not around.
All of us in the mountain communities and around this region are competing for those same people because we're all in declining demographic.
Okay, we'll continue this discussion. This might take.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want to rush into.
No, but we just need to move on here so we can get this meeting over with. We still have an executive session to go.
Sounds good.
Moving on to other business, board training, Mike and Sue, any highlights from the Brownfield Summit?
Who wants to go first?
You can go first. You can take all the glory.
I think a lot of the discussions talked, and I asked Dave the question today about financing stacks. So a financing stack for, even if you have, obviously you have challenges with the brownfield site because you have the contamination. To clean up the contamination takes money. So the money's gonna come from three sources. One would be the developer is gonna put their own equity into it, but you can't expect them to put the entire amount. The second point, you would have traditional, what I call bank financing, whether that's for the construction or the permanent piece. And then you have an alphabet group of government agencies that are available. The EPA was there, they had programs, the DEC was there, historic tax credits, David talked about. What you need to understand, and I said this to Ron and John Cusack afterwards, that they didn't have a banker on the panel. Those financing sources that assist come in at the end when it becomes permanent. So you have to get a bank or a financing company comfortable in providing the full amount of what you need to get done to get to the end where that money comes in. They go to the project, they go, yes, you did what you said you were going to do, you filed your plans. We're going to release the money to you to help drive that cost down so that developer can make money. If there was a developer there, she was an attorney. She has two minority business people in Syracuse. They're developing South Alliance Street, 10-acre former brownfield site. She's like, don't make any mistake. I'm a capitalist. We're here to make money. If this project didn't make money, we wouldn't be doing this. We didn't get the assistance of those grant programs. We wouldn't have done this. So the good news is when those projects get done, they're very, they have a lot of oversight from government agencies. So they usually are pretty good at staying on budget and not getting off the rails. So it gives an experienced bank some comfort. So if, as David said, an RFP might be a good example where an agency such as an IDA or another agency you partner with in the community has kind of set some of those parameters. They could be movable, but you know, you've almost got to have your ducks in an order before you can get the project off the ground and started. So I guess that was my 2 cents from that.
The stacking of ways to fund the project was a bit overwhelming. Because there are so many options out there, and in order to have a successful project at these brownfields, you really need all these multiple funding sources. And being that was my first brownfield summit, it was a little overwhelming. And so if you're going to do this with a brownfield site, you're going to need a developer that's kind of skilled and knowledgeable of these stacks. They said there's grants that only the IDA can apply for, but that can be part of the stack. It was informative. We talked about 2 local brownfield sites. Vince DeSantis came in with the Crescent and talked about that with the group. And Ron had a site in Broad Alban. They did a little thing called Diamond in the Rough, and we had to pick which was really the diamond in the rough. But the group there really saw a lot of potential in the Crescent in redeveloping that area. I mean, there's definitely some.
What's the Crescent again? I heard it, I forget what it was.
From the
It
Fulton
kind of,
Street,
yeah, it kind of across from Harold's is kind of the centerpiece of that, and then it would go.
You have the 2 creeks that come together, that's at one end of it, and then up by Harold's and a little bit past where Harold's is.
Wasn't that the site you were talking to me about where there were multiple owners?
Yeah,
Yes,
And what was the comment that was made by the developer?
the developer's like, the first thing that scares me is multiple homes. He's.
well, you get one, you get it cheap, you get the next one, you get it moderate, and then the last guy thinks he's got.
Yes, hold on.
Yep.
So he talked about having site control if you're gonna do a larger development project.
But, you know, a lot of the examples, we were like, who's paying? And so Racer was there, and Racer came in when GM went bankrupt, and GM had all of these buildings and sites and stuff that was, I don't have my notes with me, it was huge. It was like 200 parcels or something, all varying
Millions of square feet.
millions of square feet.
Industrial property.
Some had to be demolished, some could be just, you know, turned right around and sold. But the last line of his statement, we found out, so when GM went bankrupt, part of it, there was a trust of $500 million. Yeah. Because he was saying their holding costs on a monthly basis were $4 million, just to status quo, maintain what they'd taken on.
I think the largest building was in Pontiac, Michigan. It was a mile interior.
Yeah. So Racer took on a huge endeavor. They've gotten through 2/3 of the property has been turned over, sold and redeveloped and stuff. And so they've come a long ways. It was it's been 15 years?
15.
So it's possible, but
500 million house.
yeah.
Yes.
But also the EPA, because I asked the EDC person about the asbestos that we've encountered at Triumph. And they looked at me with like I had 2 heads. I said, what's wrong? They were like, well, we don't do asbestos. I said, well, you don't do asbestos at the EDC? They don't know that the EPA. So EPA reps were there. They have a multi-purpose grant up to $800,000. And it does 3 things. It lets you get technical assistance to identify the problem. I think we've already done that. They help you do assessment, and then they help you do cleanup. So my thought is maybe
We should reach out to them.
reach out to them.
Yep, do that. Very good. One other item, other business, just the CRG is sponsoring a small business symposium in June, which should be a pretty neat event. We've been asked to be part of that event. We will have a table there. Attached to your agenda is the flyer for that particular event. Sue and Mike and I will be residing at that table for that afternoon. I'll just pass it around. These are going to be some of the handouts that we will have at the table for anyone who stops by and wants to talk about the IDA and who we are and what we do. So looking forward to participating in that event. With that, would like to request an executive session for the purposes stated on page 8 of the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we're in executive session as of 9:20. Greg,
Second.
Joe, all in favor?
All right.
Sue gets to do.
Motion to close.
Motion to close.
Sue,
Second.
Yep,
Thank
Dave,
you.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
10:14 a.m.